Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, what, you think you've had enough election analysis? Not on this program. We're going to take a look at the national picture and then do a little review about what the state elections might mean for, guess what, for you. Pennsylvania politics and government in depth and in detail, and guess what? It all starts right now.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, we're bringing back our two political science experts, Jim Hoefler from the Political Science Department. He's a professor of political science at Dickinson College, and Berwood Yost. He runs the Opinion Research Center at Franklin and Marshall College. My colleague on the F&M poll. We believe in full disclosure. Can we do another analysis of the presidential election, guys? Say yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's why you're here. Yeah. All right, Jim. Let me start with you. Look, the president should have lost this election if it was just about economics. I mean, got to go back to FDR to find another time when the economy, had this kind of numbers: GDP growth, unemployment, pessimism, a little more optimistic towards the end. How do you explain? You got to get up. You got to get into a classroom and explain this, right?
Right.
How do you explain this?
That's why they pay us the big money.
Yeah, that's right. Go ahead.
Well, you can't. You obviously have to think about who he's running against. And Romney ran a pretty good campaign. He moved to the center, I think, probably way too late. And if he gave the kind of speech that he gave as a concession, and had more of the performance they had in the first debate earlier on. I think he would have done better. He could have won, but he never would have won in the primaries that way.
Yeah.
So our primary system is such that you just have to swing way off to the left if you're a Democrat, way off to the right.
And it's harder to get back into because there isn't any what? Middle.
There isn't any middle. So, and it is true that while things are quite bad, things have been trending good. I mean, it would be much worse, I think, to have unemployment lower, 6.5, 7, and seeing the spike go up.
Yeah.
So this happened in Reagan in '84, right? Things weren't great, but they were going in the right direction.
Much better. That's exactly right.
Let's keep in mind he didn't blow out Romney. This is still a fairly close election. So
that's true.
It's all winner take all, but Romney did pretty well.
Yeah. Berwood, on another aspect of this, one of the things we talked about is this so-called, it's demographics and it's vision. On the demographic side, and you study this a lot, the Republican Party has to be very careful about being just a white male party, doesn't it?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that what we saw happen this time around is the fact that the way the electorate looked was probably different than the way some people, particularly Republicans, suspected it would look. And it was far less white than they suspected. There were more minority voters, particularly Hispanics, even Asians, others, African Americans. And the young vote was there again. And young voters came out to vote. And so this electorate looked very much like 2008.
He didn't do as well among the various categories of people, but he did well enough, which is why it was closer, right? Go ahead.
There was still a big turnout advantage among Democrats. I think it was about 6 points, and that was close to what it was in 2008. So they turned out their voters. And I think one of the untold stories of this campaign, we think about all the high-minded themes, et cetera, but the reality is that the Democrats' ground game worked to get their voters to the polls, and I don't believe that a lot of conservatives thought that was going to be the case.
Jim, one of the, we have these demographics, as Berwood talks about, literally look like the same demographic pattern with Hispanics and African Americans and young voters and female voters by about 12 or 13 points. But there's also a sense, now, as a political scientist, we look at this all the time about vision, about where the country's going. Did Romney present, and I think you're absolutely right about that, a clear enough vision about what kind of president he would be? I mean, is ultimately that a real problem if a candidate doesn't articulate that very clearly?
Well, I don't know that Obama did that. I mean, there was a lot of criticism, I think, of him for saying, do we really know what his priorities are going forward? That really wasn't a big part of his campaign. I think the biggest vision thing that Romney could have used was this the talk about working across the aisle.
Yeah.
If you talk to Americans, and you guys know this about polling, people are just so disgusted with Washington and the gridlock and support for Congress all-time low and political institutions in general. When he's talking about working with Democrats in Massachusetts, I think that had the kind of visionary statement.
Right.
It's nothing very specific, but he's saying, I've done that. Look at 4 years of Mr. Obama, who has not done that.
So,
passed our health care without a single...
And could he have broadened that to talk more, Burr? We're going to run to a break quickly here, about the middle class and about how we were all in this together, something that Obama's pollster has now started to emphasize. It was really this sense that, even though, as Jim points out, the president didn't have specifics about where he would go in a second term, the rhetoric was there about, let's come together. In a sense, that's what you're saying.
Right.
You're applying it to Congress.
Well, I think so, but I think both sides articulated a vision. I mean, I think there was this vision on the Republican side about controlling the size of government and its interference in life, and I think that the Democrats did talk about this shared vision, and I think that was very important.
Okay, we're going to run to a break. Is Pennsylvania a swing state? 6 times now. The evidence might say no. We'll see if I can get my colleagues to disagree with me when we return.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation, educating citizens and business leaders about important public policy issues and civic affairs. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by BetterSaferRoads.com. To voice your support for safer highways and less traffic congestion, visit BetterSaferRoads.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back with political scientist Jim Hoefler and Berwood Yost from Dickinson College and Franklin and Marshall College, respectively. All right, Berwood, swing state. This is now number 6. 6 times the Democrats have won this state. Can we legitimately be called a swing state?
Yeah, I think we can. I think demographically, when you look at Pennsylvania, we have the kind of voters here that would normally appeal to, or the Republican Party would normally appeal to. I mean, almost 80% of the voters in the election were white voters. And so I think we have potentially the Republicans can win elections in this state. But they just don't have a message right now that appeals to a large swath of Pennsylvania voters, particularly Republicans. We know people in the southeastern part of the state find certain elements of that Republican message unappealing. I also think that Mitt Romney, had he challenged Pennsylvania, contested Pennsylvania sooner, probably would have made this a much closer race.
Southeast, particularly Republicans, culturally liberal.
That's right.
Jim, your take on it. Pennsylvania swing state?
Well, same thing. I would say absolutely. They were just outside the margin where they would come into Pennsylvania. And as Berwood said, I think if they did come into Pennsylvania, this could have been much more competitive. They were right outside the 4 or 5% bubble, thought they'd spend their money elsewhere. If they had come in here, it would have been closer. But you also think of how successful Republicans have been in this state. We've got Pat Toomey. We've got 2 houses in the state legislature, Republican, a governor, Republican, statewide candidates. And they didn't do well this time, right? The Democrats swept the statewide offices. But historically, Republicans have done well here and have made up for that registration disadvantage with good candidates and good campaigns. So I don't think you'll see in 2016 a Republican candidate for president writing off Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
This state will be in play all the way through.
Before I let you go, I got to ask the inevitable question. Man, you can't turn on a show without having this subject debated. I'll start with you, and we'll just reverse the order. Gridlock in Washington, a fiscal cliff. Heavily polarized House and Senate, pretty much the same people going back to Washington. President Obama, does he get, now he's free from any future re-election? You've been through this many times. You've written about this stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Gridlock, can we work our way? I know you're going to say we better.
We better, and I'd love to be optimistic. There's a little bit of me optimistic. You know, when Angus King, I heard him being interviewed, a senator from independent from Maine, replacing Olympia Snowe, was talking about that was his platform, to go down to Washington to begin to pull a coalition of, and there's not many left, of those. Bob Casey may be one of them, in a group of people who, and if there is any hope, I think it's in the Senate, because you can't gerrymander a state.
That's true, but you need a House, Berwood. You need the House,
well, you do, but I'll tell you what.
Are you optimistic?
I'm always optimistic, as you know. That's my nature. But I really do think that if they can't do it now, they'll never do it. Because, I mean, and not until we have some big electoral change. Because right now they've got all this impending disastrous, really. I mean, everybody agrees that if these things happen, we all go over the cliff together. Yeah. And there's nothing like a political deadline to focus the mind. I think they've got to do it. It doesn't spring from optimism. It springs from the reality of what happens if they don't act.
All right, look, great job. All right, coming up, our all-star business panel. We're going to get Gene Barr and Fred Anton to weigh in on a bunch of state issues and some state elections. We'll be back after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back. Well, we have our all-star panel here. Fred Anton, he's the CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, and Gene Barr, with President and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Gene, let me just start with you. For all of the change that was talked about in the country and in the state, in Pennsylvania, it looks almost like status quo. I mean, the House, no change. Some little changes, and we can get into the row offices. I know Fred, I'm going to talk to Fred about that.
Right.
Big change, anti-incumbency, it didn't seem there, did it?
Well, the biggest change is in the state Senate, where there were 3 seats that were Republican that have now switched over to the Democrat side, so the change is now 27-23. Other than that, when you look at the House, there was, at this point, 1 incumbent that lost. There may be 1 or 2 pending some of the recounting. At the congressional side, 1 incumbent lost. So there was clearly not this huge anti-incumbency, and the voters returned Senator Casey. They voted for President Obama for a second term, so you didn't see this huge resentment.
Yeah, Fred, it was almost like we're just going to keep things the way they are. This was not an election about dramatic change, was it?
No, it isn't. We're going to keep things the way we are. We did keep things the way we are. And we have Obama, and what do you expect from the Obama agenda? More of the same, more of what he did during the first term. He's got a record for 4 years. Sure, he's going to try and make some changes to make the economy better, but he tried as hard as he could during the first term, and it hasn't improved that substantially. There's really no dramatic change at the national level. The Republicans
and at the state.
And at the state. And the Republicans in the House at the national level need 218. They have 235. Sure. They've lost a few. The Senate doesn't have a 60-vote Democratic majority. They've only at best got 55 or 50.
So as elections go, Gene, I mean, I've looked at this and I'd say, well, the country, the presidential level we talked about with those guys, we don't have to get this, but in our state, it still looks like the Republicans can remain pretty competitive, as Jim Hoefler said. Now, you follow it, both you and Fred follow this very closely. Is there any dynamic at work that you would see that is a signal for the future?
Well, it was presidential year, so obviously the Democrats did quite a bit better. Even when you look at the row offices, though, two of those 3 row offices are typically held by Democrats anyway. The biggest change was in Attorney General. She carried the top of the ticket more even than President Obama. She did a great job, I think, of characterizing who her opponent was before he could get untracked. But a pretty big win, but again, not a huge significant change even at the state row office level.
Yeah, Fred, what do you, look, everybody, the state is abuzz with Kathleen Kane, new Attorney General. You're a lawyer. You've followed these elections for Attorney General very carefully through your career. This is pretty earth-shaking in Pennsylvania politics, isn't it? What do you think the implications are here?
Well, I think the implications are very serious for Governor Corbett. I frankly think sexual predators, and the literature all bears this out, are very, very difficult to apprehend, particularly sexual predators that have a high positive profile in the community. Now, unfortunately, the thrust of the Attorney General, the past Attorney General's consideration of Penn State is that they delayed the apprehension of Sandusky, that he should have been apprehended years before. Yeah. Now, I don't believe that's necessarily true, but if you apply the same standards to the Corbett investigation, even though I think Corbett was well justified in his explanation, I don't know whether that
will stand up publicly.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I think you would both agree that we're going to see, at least there's all this debate about it,
yes,
a huge change in the Attorney General's office. You both agree there, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And that could be the lead-off aspect of her administration. She says so.
Well,
why not believe what she says?
That's exactly right. I mean, she said she wants to go after certain sectors of the business community. She wants to probe more into that, and as Fred says, she wants to take more off into the Penn State side. And we've heard a lot of this talk over the particularly recent months that, you had Tom Corbett going soft on Penn State because he wanted re-election. I really don't believe that. One, I think the most obvious is if he wanted to pave his way for election into the governor's office, he wouldn't have gone after John Purcell, who at the time was one of the most powerful Republican politicos in this Commonwealth. And you've had somebody on here, one of your other guests, John Barr from the Philly Daily News, has written a column. He's looked at it, and he dismisses it, and he's no apologist for the Corbett administration. So, but it is going to be there.
Okay, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit. Fred may want to comment on. We're going to run to a break. We'll let Fred comment, and then I want to talk about what you think the implications are moving forward for the legislature, because obviously now, new session, new set, and probably old priorities. We'll see if there's new priorities and how important they are. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back with Fred Anton and Gene Barr. We're our all-star business panel. We're doing an assessment of the election as it relative to our state. Fred, you wanted to comment before we move on.
Well, I just want to comment about the Penn State situation. I think that Penn State constituency is a tremendous constituency in Pennsylvania. And I think how those prosecutions of Spangler and the others is handled can have a great impact politically on them as a voting bloc.
But we'll both agree with the civil suits and the prosecutions that the Penn State situation, I'll just call it that for the sake of time, is going to go on for some period of time. Is that right?
It's not ending anytime soon.
Plus her investigation, which she has said she will do. All right, Gene, the legislature will come back. They're actually officially not going yet, but we'll have a new session. What are two of the three biggest priorities for the legislature?
I think they've got to look at transportation. There's a continued call for transportation. We desperately need more resources into our infrastructure. There's got to be something done about Pennsylvania's pension system. We're $40 to $50 billion in the hole. Those numbers are going to go from $1.3 billion per year of the budget to 1.7 to 4 and escalating from there. They have got to be addressed. The private sector figured out a long time ago that they needed to make changes that would correct those problems in there. They made them, and unfortunately the state has not done what they've needed to do that. It's the right policy decision to do now, and in about a year or so it's going to be the right political decision, because they're going to have to raise taxes so high in order to give somebody a pension that that taxpayer for whom they're taking the money will never get. It's going to be a political issue.
All right, go ahead.
The tension over the budget will be intense this year, because whenever you don't have enough revenue to meet budget spending requirements with some escalation in spending built in, you have a lot of constituencies that are angry. And I think one of the reasons why Corbett's low in the polls is because he held the line on spending. Now, that's the right thing to do, but that doesn't prevent you from getting a backlash from the arts and from other groups that want more money.
Yeah, well, particularly the education community. Go ahead.
Yeah, the groups that want more money, I think that they should come in and say, here's where we want money. Do you want to raise the personal income tax from 3.07? Do you want to eliminate exemptions on sales tax? Do you want to pay tax on your kids' clothes and shoes? Do you want to raise what is currently the highest effective corporate net income tax rate in the U.S. and, in fact, the world? Do you want to extend the sales tax even? Where do you want to get those dollars? It's incumbent on somebody who says, I want to spend more, to say, and I'm proposing those dollars come from here.
But Fred, as we just talked, as everybody agrees, there's basically no change in the legislature. So why, I mean, is there any sense that they could just kick the proverbial can down the road? I mean,
sure,
Fred,
they can kick the can down the road. And as the Senate has a less comfortable majority, 27 to 23, they become more nervous, because the one major objective that the leaders have is to retain the majority, so they remain the leaders. So they've got to be very, very careful.
Well, there's another point here, and that is, with 27 senators, Republican senators, they need constitutionally 26 votes, if I got this correct.
Absolutely right.
26 votes most of the time to do what they need to do.
Yes.
That means there's going to be a lot of pressure on Republican unity in order to get the agenda done.
Even more than usual. You're exactly right.
Yeah, but in the Senate, not to get inside baseball, Democrats and Republicans seem to have worked more together historically than in the House, correct?
That's been the traditional in recent years. Yeah, I would say that's probably right. But you're absolutely right in that now with that margin narrowing, it makes it a little tougher to do that. But I think that there is some will to do something on the pension side.
But we have about 30 seconds, but it does give the Southeast senators, more moderate senators, a little more power, maybe. No, a little more.
It does, and the Southeast,
your neck of the woods.
The Southeastern senators and the leaders are more sensitive to more spending to satisfy their more liberal constituencies.
Fred Anton gets the last word. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.